When the therapist asked me what I wanted to talk about, I didn't say anything about my teenage daughter using drugs or my husband calling me a doormat. Instead, I started to talk about going shopping 3 months ago and not getting the right change. I hadn't said anything about it to the cashier, but ever since, I've been obsessing about that $5 I didn't get back. Maybe thinking about that was easier than thinking about my daughter or my husband. The therapist listened quietly, and when I was finished talking, he asked me if that situation reminded me of anything else. I started to cry. It's just another time when someone walked all over me, I managed to choke out. I told him about all the committees I'd volunteered for at my church because I was scared to say no, and how Wendy was smoking pot in the house, practically right in front of my face, and how my husband had been carrying on an affair that he didn't even bother to hide for over a year. Then the therapist asked me what my family taught me about pleasing other people. I told him the truth. My dad was a train wreck. Drunk, philandering, mean to my mom. If you name it, he probably did it. He didn't care about pleasing anyone. Mom was just the opposite. She always had a smile for everybody, and she was great at smoothing things over. She always told me that you catch more flies with honey than you do with vinegar. When I said that, the therapist smiled and said, "True, but is catching flies really what you want to do?" We spent most of the next month talking about my mom. The therapist told me about different coping styles. He said no style is 100% right or 100% wrong. People just do the best they can. My mom's way of coping was to pretend that the bad things didn't happen. But that wasn't working so well for me. With the therapist's support, I learned to speak up about what I wanted and needed. First, I went to my pastor and told him I was resigning from most of the church committees because I needed some time to sort out personal issues. The pastor didn't even blink. He just thanked me for everything I'd done and said that when and if I felt like being on the committees again, there would always be room for me. Then I told my husband that either his affair was over or else our marriage was. He chose the affair. No surprise, but it still hurt. And I cried a lot. The hardest thing was telling Wendy that she was always welcome in the house, but her drugs weren't. She cursed at me and even moved out to live with her best friend. She came back after a couple of weeks looking pretty miserable and telling me she was finished with drugs. I'd never been so proud of her. My mom died of cancer 6 years ago, before I went through therapy. I hope her coping style worked for her and that she was happy, but I don't think she was. All I know is I'm glad I'm doing something different.